If a picture is worth 1,000 words, a video is worth 1,000,000 pictures. Don't just write your story. Tell your story. What are you waiting for?
My dad, again, having a big family and a lot of responsibility, he had begun to say out loud that he wanted to try to find a church for us to go to because he had grown up, his parents had come from the Depression years. And his father, we learned to love him as we grew older, but he wasn't a very good father. When my father began to, gather a group of babies, he says, I need to have help raising these children. I need to watch someone. I need to see what it looks like to be a good dad. One day in the fall, when I was in third grade, we had we always had horses and animals in a little barn and things like that. And in the corral where the horses were, as horses do, they'll paw up cans and bottles and things like that. And so years ago, that big old house out in the woods, that must have been where past families had buried their garbage. And one early morning, as we were all in the house getting ready for school, my dad always went out first to feed the horses and the animals and things like that. And we heard Dad calling to us, and he had a particular, he didn't whistle at us. It was kind of a whoop, like whoop, and that we could hear him calling, kids, come here, from up the hill where the barn was. And I remember that we were actually, since we were getting dressed for school, we were still in our slips. We didn't have our school dresses on yet. And as we went running up the path toward the barn, and Dad came running down the path from the barn toward us, in his hand he had a green can in his hand. And it was, for those years ago, it was a green MJB coffee can. And in those days, there was a little key along the side and the lid rolled up like this. It kind of lifted off. And as he came running toward us, he said, kids, look at what I found. Look what the horse dug up. And he had picked it up thinking that, it was an old can, but it had some weight to it. And as he pried off the lid and showed us inside the lid was a coil of green bills inside this green coffee can. And it must have been where someone must have been keeping money and someone not knowing what was in the can threw it away long ago. As we got to stay home from school that day, all of us gathered around and helped Dad unwind and count out all these bills. And some of them were so old they began to fall apart in our hands. And in my eyes as a little girl, that was the most money I had ever seen in the world. It must have been to pirate treasure, or maybe it was a bank robbery. We drove into town and we took all of the money to the bank and said, we have just found this money and not sure what to do with it. And because any kind of money that is found has to be reported, we in fact then had to take it to the police station and report it. They put a notice in the newspaper that an amount of money had been found in our neighborhood. Would anybody come forward to claim it? And no one did. And so it was in that fall, there was enough money in that coffee can that the horse dug up in the corral on that warm fall morning. There was enough money in that coffee can to be able to buy all of those power poles up that 5-mile stretch to bring power to our house. And so a short time before Christmas, I remember the day, because we'd lived there since I was a kindergartner, when the power company came with all those big long coils of wire and strung the electrical wires to our home, and for the first time turned on the lights and had lights in our whole house. We hadn't had a telephone or a furnace or hot and cold running water or none of those things, because you need electricity to make that happen. I think we probably didn't turn off the lights for a week, left them on day and night, all that time. And it was in that winter that shortly before Christmas that it was a stormy and windy, rainy night, only as it can be in the northwest as rain will fall. And there's nothing darker than a deep, dark woods on a winter rainy night. And we heard a car pull up the little hill toward our house, and two men came stumbling and knocking on the front door, bedraggled and wet, and saying that they had lost their way. They didn't have any idea where they were. And my father invited them in. They were men that were dressed in a white suit and tie, and they had a name tag on that said, "We are elders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints." And it was as they were driving through that rural area on that old county road, there was nothing but deep darkness in that windy, rainy night, except across and through the trees, they could see a great big old house lit up like a birthday cake with every light in the house shining. And so it was just a few short weeks after we had a horse dig up an old can full of money, and there was enough money in that can to come and light up a great big old house in the woods for a family with a dad who was looking for some help to raise a family. He needed to know what a good dad looked like. And he was baptized that summer. And I remember the names of the men that came to our door. His name was Roland Rose and Tom Warden. It was miraculous to be able to, a carpenter with a family of 5 children out in the woods with no electricity, to find the means to be able to bring 5 miles of power poles to a house way out in the woods. And it was the light of that house that lit up the woods that brought 2 lost and rain-soaked ward missionaries to our door and begin a relationship that brought the gospel and changed our lives.